were so excited. You just saw vans and pickup trucks and buses full of young people touching their guns, saying, we're going to Sirte, we're going to Tripoli. They were very enthusiastic of the territorial gains they made. But as they went to Ras Laffan and then further up, I think they, for the first time, met the might of the Gaddafi forces. They do have still a lot of equipment, certainly air superiority. They have surface-to-surface missiles that they have been using over the past 48 hours. And I think now there is certainly a realization among all these volunteers that the will is okay, but you certainly need a command structure. Military commanders here in the East had been complaining over the past few days that they couldn't control the enthusiasm of these young people. They do say now that they're managing to slowly give some sort of structure really to the advance of the rebels. And I think what we're going to see in the next 24 hours or so is probably the rebels regrouping next to Ras Lanouf and trying to go under some sort of order and follow the commands of the military here.
And does Ras Lanouf, we're looking at some pictures of the fighting there and the people on the streets, has it taken on a significance far greater than its strategic importance in terms of what it represents to either Gaddafi's troops or the rebels?
Certainly it has, because so far all what you've seen is rebels advancing through AlJazeera, through Brega, and fighting a little bit with Gaddafi forces, and then you had these Gaddafi forces retreating. Now they took it as a victory. I think now there's a realization that maybe it was some sort of trap to make the rebels advance even further towards Sirte. That gives the Gaddafi forces the ability to have backup, and when they arrive there, they find themselves, well, the battle has completely changed now. It has gone to a much more dangerous degree, a much more serious degree. It's a much more militarized battle. And I think at this stage, you're going to have a deadlock there until a deadlock that will eventually lead to either the rebels retreating towards Brega and then Benghazi, or the rebels actually managing to impose a defeat on the Gaddafi forces. But when you speak to commanders, they do tell you this is not going to be solved very quickly. I think all the easy part is gone. All what's laying ahead is going to be very complicated, and they will admit that this could take weeks, if not months.
Hold up. This time, 24 hours ago, you broke the exclusive news that the members of the so-called British diplomatic mission who'd found themselves rather embarrassingly captured had been released. We know that probably 6 or 7 of them were members of the SAS Special Forces. And you've got some more news on that could heap further embarrassment on the UK government.
Well, yes, we do. According to our sources, when their helicopter landed south of Benghazi, it was during the thick of night, and I think they thought that they would go unnoticed then, but eventually they were received really by residents and rebels who basically heard the noise of the helicopter, and as they got off the helicopter, there was an exchange of gunfire between the two sides that lasted about 10 to 15 minutes. Now, we're told that the rebels really wanted to catch these people because they didn't know who was landing in the middle of the night like that. And on the other side, apparently they were trying not to hurt the rebels, not to get entangled into an even more difficult position. So apparently that gunfire lasted about 15 minutes until the rebels got hold of these 8 people.
So, British forces firing shots on Libyan soil. That's a new line. Hoda, thank you very much indeed for that. Barack Obama, will he say the United States and its allies are still thinking, possibly, about a military response to what's going on in Libya? Nick Clark's in Washington for us.
Yes, thanks, David. Well, Obama also said he's authorized an additional $15 million in humanitarian aid to Libya. He was speaking alongside the Australian Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, on Monday at the White House, and Obama again called the violence in Libya unacceptable.
I want to send a very clear message to those who are around Colonel Gaddafi. It is their choice to make how they operate moving forward, and they will be held accountable for whatever violence continues to take place there. In the meantime, we've got NATO, as we speak, consulting in Brussels around a wide range of potential options, including potential military options, in response to the violence that continues to take place inside of Libya.
So that's Barack Obama, and his comments come after several leading U.S. senators and officials said the president should be considering a wide range of options for Libya. Here's what senior Democratic U.S. Senator John Kerry and the top Republican Senator Mitch McConnell said on Sunday.
1, prepare a no-fly zone in conjunction with our allies, not implement it. The last thing we want to think about is any kind of military intervention. And I don't consider the fly zone stepping over that line. We don't want troops on the ground. They don't want troops on the ground. That would be counterproductive.
The other option that John Kerry alluded to in passing that I think we used frequently during the Cold War period is simply aiding and arming the insurgents.
So that was the top Republican, the U.S. Senator Mitch McConnell. Democrats have also voiced support for arming rebels. Bill Richardson served as ambassador to the UN under Bill Clinton. And on Sunday, he said, what I think the U.S. needs to do is covertly arm the rebels. Well, Richardson also supported the idea of the U.S. developing this no-fly zone with international allies. But last week, U.S. Defense Secretary Robert Gates laid out what exactly a no-fly zone would mean.
There's a lot of, frankly, loose talk about some of these military options, and let's just call a spade a spade. A no-fly zone begins with an attack on Libya to destroy the air defenses. That's the way you do a no-fly zone. And then you can fly planes around the country and not worry about our guys being shot down.
Speak to AlJazeera's Patty Culhane outside the White House, joins us right now. Patty, so Obama saying that a military response is still being considered, but are we actually any further forward from Hillary Clinton's remarks that all options are on the table?
Well, that's pretty much what they've been saying. All options are on the table. But just last week, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton told Congress they were still a long way off from any decision on a no-fly zone. So when the president mentioned that we were going to look to NATO to talk about military options, and he brought that up unprompted, it may have given people an indication that they were taking a further step. But his White House press spokesman has just come out during a briefing happening behind me, and he said, I wouldn't characterize the likelihood of options, including military being approved, as any greater now. Basically, reading between the lines, which is often what you have to do when talking about people in Washington, is it at least gives the international community a place to look, that this administration is looking to NATO, and then that gives us a bit of a time frame to look for any potential action. I believe Secretary of Defense Robert Gates is going to be in those meetings on Thursday. But again, this administration saying we're looking at all options, but again, we're not going to do this alone. So the president just reaffirming basically what he's been saying, but it does give us a bit of a timeline.
Give you something else, Patty, to read between the lines. What about this talk of arming the rebels and even training the rebels?
Well, the White House press spokesman was asked about that, especially there have been reports that they might ask other nations to do it by proxy, and he said, I have simply nothing for you on that. And then a very striking comment, he said, we're not just going to send a bunch of weapons to a P.O. box in Libya. Basically,